Image boards are some of the most unusual spaces on the internet. At their core, they're simple forums where anyone can post pictures and text without attaching a name. But in practice, this lack of identity has allowed for communities to form that look very different from what most people are used to online. Some of these boards are harmless, dedicated to small hobbies or jokes, while others have built reputations for harassment, extremism, and crimes that have reached into the real world. Over time, activity on these sites has been tied to riots that turned violent, coordinated harassment campaigns, mass shootings planned and announced online, and the spread of CSAM through dark web groups. And the deeper you look into this world, the worse it becomes. Guro-chan was first created in the mid-2000s, shortly after 4chan removed its own Guro board by two users known as Oz and Chiisai. At the time, it ran on simple forum software and quickly became the main hub for English-speaking fans of Ero Guro, a niche artistic genre centered on material that is both erotic and grotesque. For nearly a decade, the site operated without much change before going offline in 2014 for reasons that were never made public. Since then, the board has been rebooted several times under different administrators and domains. Each new version carried over the archives from the last, preserving the material that had been posted there. The site has switched hands multiple times, from private individuals to networks like Kolima, before ending up under its current owner, known only as Kaguya. Through these transitions, it's been hosted at gurochan.net, guroch.org, gurochan.ch, gurochan.sx, and most recently, guro.cx. The board's focus is Ero Guro. It's an art and adult content niche that mixes erotic imagery with graphic violence and body harm. For some users, it sits on the same spectrum as other exaggerated adult content genres, where the appeal builds by pushing an existing interest further from what is realistic. Others approach it the way some people approach consensual pain play, describing an adrenaline response and a learned association that turns pain or the idea of harm into part of the arousal. In that context, the drawings function as fantasy, and many users say that is where it ends. More recently, the board has shifted with the rise of AI. Users now generate Guro content automatically, creating endless amounts of violent imagery that would have been impossible to make at this scale before. Alongside this has been a rise in lolly content. In some countries, it's treated as virtual CSAM and banned outright, while in others, it exists in a grey area under obscenity or adult content laws. What is consistent is that it remains one of the most controversial aspects of the board, both for the way it looks and for the legal risks that come with it. So while Guro-chan hasn't been linked to major incidents outside its own community, the extreme nature of the content and the way new technology is being used to produce it has kept the site controversial for over 20 years. Futaba Channel, also known as 2chan, is a Japanese image board that first went online in August of 2001. It was created as a backup for users of 2channel, which at the time was facing possible closure. At first, it only offered text boards, but within months, image boards were added, running on software called Gazoo BBS. This change quickly set it apart, and over time, it developed its own culture, eventually splitting into different servers and dozens of boards covering everything from daily life to anime, sports, food, and adult content. Futaba's influence on the internet was significant. Its format inspired the creation of 4chan in 2003 and later helped shape other regional boards like Krautchan in Germany and 2ch.ru in Russia, and many of the in-jokes, memes and posting styles that define image board culture today can be traced directly back to Futaba. Over time, however, Futaba has also built a reputation for exclusivity and hostility toward outsiders. It developed a long-running rivalry with 5ch, rejecting attempts to import its culture or spread Futaba memes outside of the site. It has also become a space where nationalist and right-wing views are common, especially on certain boards, with anti-Korean and anti-Chinese sentiment appearing frequently in discussions. While not every part of the site is political, those boards have helped shape its reputation in Japan as an insular and often toxic community. One of the main sources of controversy around Futaba comes from the way it deals with posts that break the rules. In 2008, a deletion request function was added, allowing users to report threads for reasons like CSAM, harassment, or doxing. When a report was confirmed, administrators could delete the image or the thread entirely. In severe cases, the IP address of the poster would be revealed publicly, displayed in red numbers next to their post. Users caught this way became known as akaji, or red letters. In 2013, the system went even further. On boards that didn't normally use IDs, if enough deletion requests were filed, the identity of the poster would be forced into the open. Supporters of the system argued that this discouraged rule-breaking and made people think twice before posting illegal or abusive content. But it also carried obvious risks. Revealing someone's IP address doesn't just remove their anonymity, it can show their location, their internet provider, and can even be used as a starting point for cyber attacks or harassment outside the board itself. This tension between anonymity and accountability has followed Futaba ever since. On one hand, it made the site less hospitable to some of the worst material. On the other, it created a culture where posting could carry serious risks if enough people decided to target you. Ylilauta is a Finnish image board that first launched in 2011. It came about by merging two older communities, Kotilauta and Lauta.net, and quickly became one of the biggest sites in Finland, creating memes such as Spurdo Spard and Dolan Duck. At one point, it was even the fourth most searched word on Google in the country. Today, it still draws millions of visitors each month, making it one of the most active non-English image boards on the internet. Ylilauta has always been one of the most hostile corners of the Finnish internet. Looking into the site, you can find its threads filled with misogyny, anti-feminism, and endless trolling. A small number of users pushed back, but they were buried under the noise. The site's money trail has also been a problem. For years, it ran ads for foreign online casinos, which is illegal in Finland. Police eventually stepped in, and soon after Google cut off its AdSense program over threads filled with hate speech and harassment. Ownership was tied to tax havens and eventually moved to Estonia. By 2022, Ylilauta scrapped ads entirely and switched to a paid model. In 2023, the site was one of the first places to host AI-generated photos of Donald Trump with Jeffrey Epstein. The fakes spread everywhere, but the copies on Ylilauta were some of the originals. They showed classic AI errors, like Epstein missing his legs and random distorted hands, but that didn't stop them from being treated as real. Ylilauta's biggest controversies have come from the role it's played in spreading leaked data. In 2011, users of the board published thousands of stolen Finnish account details taken from multiple sites. Among them was a car service called Netcar, where over 12,000 usernames and passwords were dumped onto the forum. At the time, it was described as the largest series of data leaks in the country's history. The board would become linked to another major breach almost a decade later. When the psychotherapy center Vastaamo was hacked in 2020, the stolen patient records, which contained highly sensitive details about people's private therapy sessions, were leaked online. Portions of that information surfaced on Ylilauta, ensuring the material spread faster and reached a much larger audience. In both cases, Ylilauta wasn't responsible for the original hacks, but it provided a place for stolen data to be shared publicly. And because of the board's reach, what could have remained isolated incidents instead became scandals that affected thousands of people. Before Ililauta, we had Kuvalauta. Kuvalauta was one of Finland's earliest and most popular image boards. It launched in December of 2007, created by an admin known only as Gabo, whose real name has never been revealed. It acted as the successor to another board called Finchan, and for a while, Kuvalauta became one of the top 200 most visited sites in the country. Kuvalauta didn't last long, but the time it was active was chaotic. In 2009, a post appeared on the site threatening Harju School in Jyväskylä. The message didn't say exactly how the attack would happen, but it was enough for police to take it seriously. The school was shut down, security was placed around the area, and overnight searches led to computers being seized. No arrests came out of it, but the panic it caused showed how quickly something typed on Kuvalauta could spill over into the real world. That same year, Kuvalauta was also tied to a wave of spam attacks. Users flooded Finland's biggest forum, Suomi24, with posts linking back to the board. At one point, one of Suomi24's moderators was directly targeted, and Kuvalauta's own front page had to put up a message asking people to stop. Things escalated again in October 2009. A user posted that he had blown up a traffic camera pole in Lapland. Hours later, a video appeared on YouTube showing the camera reduced to pieces. In his post, the bomber bragged about using 700 grams of explosives. Police later confirmed the damage could have cost up to €30,000. And in 2010, Kuvalauta found itself in the middle of another scandal, when more than 120,000 stolen passwords were dumped on the site. The data had come from a breach of a Finnish puzzle and gaming service called Elipar. Despite its popularity, the board was short-lived. By August of 2010, it was shut down entirely after disputes with its service provider and pressure from police investigations. Kuvalauta had gone from being just another image board to one of the most notorious corners of the Finnish internet. Krautchan, often shortened to KC, was a German image board that went online in the mid-2000s. Despite being based in Germany, its most active board was /int, the international board, where users posted in English and were tagged with a flag showing their country. This gave the site a different feel from other image boards, since you stayed anonymous, but your nationality was always visible. Unlike most image boards, postings on Krautchan were not published under the generic name Anonymous. The German name Bernd was used instead, and the Krautchan community identified themselves as Bernds instead of Anons. It became known for Poland Ball, a meme that started when a Polish user and a British user argued on /int, and someone began drawing crude comics of countries as balls to mock them. The idea caught on quickly and spread to other users, eventually making its way to 4chan, Facebook, and Reddit, where it's still popular today. By 2018, Krautchan was in decline. The site became inaccessible, with some speculating it had been shut down under Germany's Anti-Hate Speech Act, though in reality, the admins had largely abandoned it. Many of its users migrated to other boards, including 4chan's own /int, and while a revival exists at krautchan.rip, it's never reached the same activity. Whilst editing this, I found only 8 people to be online. Krautchan also became briefly notorious after the Winnenden school shooting in March of 2009. On the morning of March 11th, 17-year-old Tim Kretschmer entered his former school in southwestern Germany, armed with a pistol. He killed 15 people before taking his own life in a nearby town. Soon after, officials claimed that Kretschmer had posted a warning on Krautchan hours before the attack, even quoting messages that appeared to describe his plan and naming the town directly. The post read, "Damn it, Anonymous, this is getting to me. I'm fed up with this crappy life, always the same. Everybody laughs at me, nobody recognizes my potential. I'm serious, Anonymous. I have weapons here, and tomorrow morning I'll go to my former school and have a great time barbecuing. Maybe I will even get away. Keep your ears open, Anons. You will hear from me tomorrow. Just remember the name of the location. Winnenden." German media repeated the story widely, presenting it as proof that the shooting had been announced online in advance. But within a day, investigators admitted the post was a hoax. There was no evidence that Kretschmer had written it, and Krautchan itself confirmed that the announcement never existed. Someone had simply inserted a fake message onto the board during the chaos, and it was mistaken for a genuine threat. This was one of the first times an image board was linked to a mass shooting in this way, and although it turned out to be false, it wouldn't be the last. The idea that a user could stage a hoax like this for attention, and that it could be amplified by the media before being verified, became one of the recurring controversies around boards like Krautchan. Kolchan is another German-language image board that went live in 2018, shortly after the collapse of Krautchan. When Krautchan shut down, many of its users scattered to smaller boards, but Kolchan quickly established itself as the most prominent successor, inheriting much of the same community, style and culture. The part that gets it the most attention, though, is its poll board. Like other politically incorrect boards, it's a space where far-right ideas get shared openly. You'll see threads about history mixed in with racism, homophobia, and transphobia. There's also a strong undercurrent of misogyny, with discussions that cross into the exploitation of women and girls. Current events are constant, but the information people share there isn't coming from reliable sources, basically propaganda, conspiracy sites, or sensationalist blogs. And when it's not those, it's often alternative media, like YouTube commentary channels being used as if they were primary sources. In that way, Kolchan's poll board ends up looking a lot like the more infamous boards on 4chan or 8con, smaller, but running on the same kind of ideas. In October 2019, Kolchan became tied to one of the most serious far-right terror attacks in Germany. On Yom Kippur, a 27-year-old neo-Nazi named Stefan Balliet attempted to force his way into a synagogue in Halle, Saxony-Anhalt. Inside were more than 50 people. When the doors held, Balliet turned his weapons on bystanders, taking the lives of a woman in the street and a man in a kebab shop nearby. 2 others were injured before he was arrested. Before carrying out the attack, Balliet posted his manifesto on Kolchan. The document laid out his anti-Semitic and racist motivations, as well as technical details about the homemade firearms and explosives he had built. These were improvised weapons modelled after designs from Philip Lutti, and during the shooting they jammed repeatedly, a failure that almost certainly prevented a much higher death toll. Balliet live-streamed the entire attack on Twitch. In the footage he introduces himself as Anon, echoing the culture of boards like Kolchan, and declares himself anti-Semitic, anti-feminist, and a Holocaust denier. Copies of the video spread quickly across Telegram and Twitter after Twitch removed it, eventually reaching tens of thousands of viewers. Federal investigators classified the Halle attack as far-right terrorism. Balliet was convicted of 2 counts of murder and 7 counts of attempted murder, and in 2020 was sentenced to life imprisonment with preventive detention. The fact that Kolchan hosted his manifesto placed it directly within the chain of events leading up to the attack. What had been a successor to Krautchan, known mostly for its international and politically incorrect boards, was now associated with an act of terror that killed 2 people and was intended to massacre dozens more. IndiaChan was an anonymous Indian image board created in 2016 by a user who went by Lungimoot or Longoot. The site was modelled after 4chan and 8chan, and while it allowed posting in both English and Hinglish, a combination of Hindi and English, the culture that developed there was far more hostile. The board became known for openly hosting hate speech. Posts included Islamophobic memes, casteist insults, and misogynistic content that at times encouraged violence. Some of the images shared on the site were incredibly racist, including depictions of the Kaaba used as a toilet, cartoons showing Muslims being killed, and threads that promoted the idea of women, as well as providing instructions on how best to do it. Much of this tied into Hindutva, a political ideology that pushes Hindu supremacy and calls for transforming India into an ethno-religious state, the Hindu Rashtra. Muslims were a primary target, and India Chan provided an anonymous space where that hatred could be amplified without consequence. India Chan eventually went offline, but it wasn't the last of its kind. Other boards soon appeared to replace it, carrying on the same mix of Hindutva propaganda, Islamophobia, and misogyny that had defined the original. After India Chan disappeared, one of the boards that took its place was Parachan. It carried over the same anonymous format and quickly became a home for Hindu nationalist hate speech and extremist discussion. A 2024 report by the United Nations Inter-Regional Crime and Justice Research Institute examined Parachan directly. It found repeated examples of incitement to violence against Muslims, along with threads filled with anti-Semitism, trolling, and Hindu supremacist rhetoric. The board openly displayed a swastika at the top of its page and described itself as being dedicated to uncensored discourse. Alongside the hate speech were threads on hacking and programming. Users shared tips on breaking into Wi-Fi networks, learning TypeScript, and using AI tools. Outside accounts also confirm what the board is truly like. On Twitter, one woman described receiving threats from Parachan users. Screenshots of their responses showed no attempt to deny it, only justification. The site remains online today, still home to the same kind of incels, extremists, and hateful content that defined it from the start. The first version of Dvach, also called 2ch.ru, was launched in 2006 by a user named Vikenty Fesunov with help from another called Zoe. It was modelled after 4chan and announced to anime communities on LiveJournal. In the beginning, it was mostly a quiet board for anime, memes, and net culture. Later that same year, Russian users joined after 4chan's so-called B-Day, the moment 4chan's staff finally cracked down on CSAM and raids that had been taking over the site's B-board, and this brought more attention to the site. As more users arrived, problems started. By 2007, spammers were wiping threads, and with no capture or strong moderation, the site became chaotic. This led to the creation of eChan as a moderated alternative, but it eventually shut down in 2015. Capture was finally added on Dvach in 2008, but the site's community had already shifted. On January 17, 2009, the original Dvach shut down. A few years later, it was revived as 2ch.hk. This new version grew into the largest anonymous image board in Russia, but quickly gained a reputation for harassment, misogyny, and toxic trolling. Back in 2011, users of Dvach were tied to denial-of-service attacks against Russian opposition websites. The sites went offline during politically sensitive moments, and everyone knew where the attacks were coming from. By 2015, Dvach had become known for pushing hoaxes after shootings and terror attacks. Users would post fake eulogies and fake IDs of suspects, the same way 4chan made Sam Hyde a running gag. They even inserted Sasha Grey, an adult entertainer, into one of these hoaxes. During the war in Donbass, a viral VK post used her photo with a story about a nurse called Sasha Sarova, who was supposedly captured and killed by Ukrainian forces. The story got thousands of likes before people realized it was a complete fabrication. Around the same time, Russian censors also blocked one of Dvach's boards after reports of CSAM. In 2016, the site's culture turned even darker when users started abusing a new facial recognition app called FindFace. The app had just been demonstrated by a photographer named Igor Tsvetkov, who used it to show how easily strangers on the metro could be linked to their real social media accounts. His whole point was to warn people about the dangers of giving up so much of their identity online. But within days, users of Dvach took the same technology and used it to target women. They ran images of adult entertainers through the app, found their VK profiles, which is Russia's version of Facebook, and then harassed them directly by posting their names and photos to friends and family. A VK community, which is a dedicated space to gather and share content, was even set up to support the campaign, where users uploaded links to archived copies of the women's pages so that the information would remain available even if accounts were deleted or privacy settings changed. The justification DeVach users gave was moral outrage and that sex workers were corrupt and deceptive. In reality, it was just misogyny dressed up as virtue. VK quickly shut down forums spreading the harassment, and the developers of FindFace admitted they couldn't stop the abuse, only offering help to investigators if needed. Then, in 2018, the Kerch Polytechnic College massacre took place in Crimea. 18-year-old student Vladislav Roslyakov carried out a shooting and bombing attack inside the school, killing 20 people and wounding 67 before taking his own life. It was the deadliest school shooting in the region since Beslan in 2004. After the attack, Roslyakov's accounts were hacked and his private messages ended up on DeVach. Instead of condemning what happened, users treated him like a celebrity, dissecting his chats and posting tributes that turned a mass killer into another Chan-style icon. DeVach has long been a home to some of the nastiest corners of Russian internet culture, but not everything that's come out of it has been negative. In 2016, users exposed 2 teenage girls from Khabarovsk after they posted photos bragging about animals and abusing homeless people. DeVach users archived the images, traced their identities, and pushed the case to media and police. Both girls were eventually sentenced to prison. Then, in 2019, a studio producing CSAM in Kyiv was uncovered after users on DeVach used face search tools to identify people in the videos. They collected the operator's details and circulated them until Ukrainian police stepped in and made arrests. And in 2020, when a man posted from a hospital claiming he had been disabling ventilators to kill elderly patients, it was DeVach users who traced his photos and information back to Sergei Kalinin in Perm. He admitted it was a hoax, but he was quickly fired. Even the tools DeVach users have abused, like FindFace, have occasionally been turned against criminals. DeVach still exists to this day, a board that can bring both justice and chaos under one platform. "4chan was launched in October 2003 by Christopher Poole, better known as Moot. He was only 15 at the time, setting up the site as an English version of Japan's Futaba channel, or 2chan. The first and only board back then was B, meant for anime and random posts. From there, the site quickly grew, adding new boards for hentai, wallpapers, yaoi, and general anime discussion. In those early years, 4chan became the birthplace of a whole wave of internet culture. Memes like Rick Rolling, lolcats, rage comics, Wojaks, and Pepe the Frog all came out of its boards. The site also became a gathering place for online movements like Anonymous, and later, the alt-right. But from the very start, 4chan's lack of moderation drew problems. In 2004, it had to shut down its Lolicon board after users started posting real CSAM, with threats of legal action forcing Moot to delete it. That same year, the site's original domain, 4chan.net, was suspended by GoDaddy, and it was moved to 4chan.org, where it still operates today. By 2008, mainstream outlets were already calling it everything from juvenile and lunatic to brilliant and alarming. And with more than 22 million unique visitors a month today, half from the US alone, 4chan is still one of the most influential and notorious websites on the internet. I've already made 4 videos looking at 4chan in detail, breaking down its darkest threads and stories. If you're new here and want to see more of that side of the site, you can find those on my channel. I'll leave some links in the description below. For now, I'm not going to repeat them. Instead, we'll look at some of the wider controversies that put 4chan in the spotlight. One of 4chan's earliest controversies were internet raids. In late 2006 and early 2007, users targeted radio host Hal Turner with denial of service attacks and non-stop prank calls. His website went offline, and he claimed it cost him thousands in bandwidth. Turner tried to sue 4chan, 7chan, and others, but the case went nowhere. By 2008, the raids escalated. A user hacked into Sarah Palin's Yahoo Mail account while she was running for vice president, posting screenshots to B and WikiLeaks. Other users piled in after he accidentally exposed the new password in one of his screenshots. The account was locked, and soon the FBI and Secret Service were investigating. Around the same time, Apple's stock briefly plummeted after a fake story appeared on CNN's iReport claiming Steve Jobs had suffered a heart attack. That hoax also traced back to 4chan. YouTube was another frequent target. In 2009, users flooded the platform with adult content disguised as videos of teen celebrities. One confused commenter wrote, "I'm 12 years old, and what is this?" A line that became an internet meme. In 2010, they hit YouTube again after a 12-year-old account named LukeyWes1234 was banned for being underage. 4chan users had grown attached to him and responded by uploading another wave of adult content clips. Later that year, they hijacked polls and spammed campaigns to troll pop star Justin Bieber, at one point trying to vote him into performing a concert in North Korea. Some raids carried more weight. In 2010, when the film industry hired firms to cyber-attack the Pirate Bay, 4chan users helped launch Operation Payback, targeting the MPAA, the RIAA, and law firm ACS Law. After one attack, ACS Law's site came back online with a backup file accidentally exposed on the front page. The leak contained over 300 megabytes of private emails, which quickly spread across torrents. The fallout was so severe that ACS Law collapsed soon after. Even advertising campaigns weren't safe. In 2012, Mountain Dew launched Dub the Dew, an online poll to name a new flavour. 4chan users flooded it with joke entries like diabetes, FAPL, and did nothing wrong. The contest was shut down within days. Threats of violence have also been tied to 4chan since its early days. In October 2006, the Department of Homeland Security warned the NFL about a supposed plan to detonate dirty bombs in 7 stadiums across the US. The date was set for October 22nd, the last day of Ramadan. The FBI already doubted the threat, and it turned out to be nothing more than a hoax posted by a grocery store clerk in Wisconsin. He was arrested and sentenced to 6 months in prison and ordered to pay over $26,000 in restitution. A year later, on September 11, 2007, a post appeared on B claiming bombs would go off at Pflugerville High School in Texas at 9:11 a.m. The poster even uploaded photos of fake pipe bombs and himself holding them, alongside a list of weapons he said he'd use. Other users dug into the photo's metadata, pulled his father's name from the EXIF data, and tipped off police. He was arrested before school started. The bombs turned out to be toys, but the school had already been thrown into chaos. That same year in December, police in Melbourne, Australia, arrested a 20-year-old after he wrote on 4chan that he planned to shoot and kill as many people as I can at a shopping mall. The post was accompanied by an image of another man holding a shotgun. While no attack happened, he was still charged, though he died before the case reached court at the age of 21. I couldn't find any information as to his cause of death. In February 2009, another post threatened a school shooting at St. Eskil's Gymnasium in Sweden. Authorities evacuated more than 1,200 students and 50 teachers. The poster, a 21-year-old man, was traced through his IP address and arrested. He admitted it was a joke, but the disruption was real. In 2023, 3 separate users were arrested for threatening Florida Sheriff Mike Chitwood after he spoke out against anti-Semitism. One of them lived nearly 1,000 miles away in New Jersey, but still called for Chitwood to be shot in the head. The other 2, from California and Connecticut, posted similar threats and were also taken into custody. And as recently as 2024, 4chan was used to post bomb threats against the Norwegian Parliament building. Police shut it down and searched the premises, but no explosives were ever found. The culprit was never identified. Throughout its history, another recurring issue has been CSAM. In the early 2000s, a string of arrests were tied directly to 4chan. Over the span of just a few years, multiple users across the United States were investigated by the FBI and Homeland Security for downloading or sharing CSAM they had accessed on the site. And in each instance, investigators traced the material back to 4chan's boards. And that's only scratching the surface. 4chan has a long history of infamous posts and threads that I've already covered in past videos. If you want to see more of those, you'll find links in the description. '8chan was launched in October 2013 by a programmer named Frederick Brennan. He came up with the idea while on a psychedelic mushroom trip, convinced the internet was heading into heavy surveillance and censorship. In his eyes, 4chan was becoming too authoritarian, so he set out to make what he called a free speech-friendly alternative. Anyone could create their own board, and almost nothing was off limits. It didn't take long before the site became infamous. By 2015, Google had already blocked it from search results for hosting CSAM. Over the years, it turned into a hub for harassment campaigns, extremist politics, and conspiracy groups. Brennan stepped away from the project in 2015, and by 2018, he was no longer involved at all. Control had passed to Jim Watkins, an American living in the Philippines. The site kept growing, but in 2019, everything changed. Under mounting pressure, Cloudflare first defended keeping 8chan on its service, only to reverse course the very next day. They announced they were terminating support at midnight, leaving the site open to attacks and effectively knocking it offline. Brennan himself publicly thanked Cloudflare and said the site should stay down. Not long after, Tucows, 8chan's domain registrar, also cut ties, making it even harder to access. The site tried to move to BitMitigate, a division of Epic, which had hosted other fringe platforms. But when Voxility, the backbone provider, realized its servers were being used for 8chan, it shut off service immediately. That sent the site into another blackout. For months, 8chan could only be reached directly through its raw IP address or via onion services on the dark web. At the same time, the US House Committee on Homeland Security called Jim Watkins to testify about how the site was being run. He later uploaded a video insisting the shutdown was voluntary and promised it would come back once protections were in place. That comeback was announced in October 2019. A new name and a new logo, 8kun. The logo featured a snake shaped into the number 8, a nod to the Gadsden flag. The switch from chan to kun played on Japanese honorifics, signalling what they claimed was a fresh start. Board owners were invited to migrate their communities, and the site attempted to relaunch, but the transition was chaotic. Hosting companies pulled support repeatedly, with one even accusing the team of giving false registration details. At one point, Watkins physically moved the servers himself, loading them into a van. By November, the site came back online through Vanwatech, a US provider already known for hosting controversial platforms. Since then, 8kun has remained up, though under constant scrutiny. One of the first major controversies tied to 8chan came in 2014 during the Gamergate harassment campaign. When 4chan banned discussion of it, users simply shifted to 8chan, which quickly became one of the main hubs pushing the movement. The campaign started after a blog post from a developer's ex-boyfriend spread across forums, accusing her of sleeping with a journalist for good reviews. The claims weren't true, but the story lit a fuse. What followed was a wave of harassment against her and other women in the gaming industry, including feminist critic Anita Sarkeesian and developer Brianna Wu. On 8chan, entire boards were set up to coordinate around Gamergate. Users shared doxes, spread threats and death threats, and painted their campaign as a fight for ethics in games journalism. In reality, it was mostly an excuse to target women and anyone speaking out about sexism in gaming. In January 2015, 8chan was used to coordinate swatting attacks in Portland, Seattle, and Burnaby, Canada. The targets were mostly people who had spoken out against Gamergate or criticized 8chan. One victim later said she was singled out just for following someone on Twitter. The attacks were organized on a board called Baphomet. A month later, in February 2015, that board was wiped after users posted the personal details of federal judge Catherine Forrest, who was presiding over the Silk Road case. In 2019, another threat appeared on the site. This time, a user posted about carrying out a mass shooting at Bethel Park High School. Police traced it back to an 18-year-old who was arrested and charged with terroristic threats. 8chan's stance on free speech also extended into some of its darkest corners. Boards were created where users openly discussed and shared CSAM. The site's rules technically banned illegal content, but in practice, those boards linked out to explicit child abuse material hosted elsewhere. When asked about it, 8chan's founder Frederick Brennan admitted it was a consequence of the site's philosophy. In his words, "I don't support the content on the boards you mentioned, but it is simply the cost of free speech and being the only active site to not impose more laws than those that were passed in Washington, D.C. That same hands-off approach is also what allowed 8chan to become the home of one of the most infamous conspiracy movements in recent history, QAnon. In late 2017, a mysterious poster calling himself Q appeared on 4chan, claiming to be a government insider with top-level clearance. Within weeks, he had moved over to 8chan, and from that point on, every single Q post, known as Q drops, came from there. The messages mixed older claims like Pizzagate with new ideas, alleging that a global cabal of elites were running a child trafficking ring and that Donald Trump was secretly fighting against them. Slogans like "The Great Awakening," "Follow the White Rabbit," and "Where we go one, we go all" spread quickly, first through aggregator sites cataloguing Q's posts, and then across YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook. By 2018, QAnon had gone from obscure Imageboard threads to appearing on signs and shirts at Trump rallies. In 2019, a QAnon supporter vandalized America's Stonehenge, carving its slogan into the stone. By 2020, QAnon accounts were amplifying misinformation about the US election, spreading hashtags about voter fraud, and pushing theories like Italygate, which claimed the Vatican and Italian hackers helped rig the vote. Politicians like Marjorie Taylor Greene openly embraced QAnon, helping it move further into mainstream politics. And on January 6, 2021, followers stormed the US Capitol alongside other groups, waving Q flags, wearing Q merchandise, and repeating Q slogans. Even after Q stopped posting, the movement didn't disappear. In 2022, German authorities disrupted a coup plot tied to QAnon believers, showing that the conspiracy born on 8chan continued to inspire extremist activity around the world. By 2019, the focus on 8chan shifted again, this time for something far worse. That March, an Australian man named Brenton Tarrant carried out 2 mosque shootings in Christchurch, New Zealand. He first attacked the Al-Noor Mosque, then minutes later, the Linwood Islamic Centre. 51 people were killed, and nearly 90 more were injured. Tarrant had spent years on boards like 4chan and 8chan, where he consumed far-right content and conspiracy theories. Before the attack, he posted links to a 74-page manifesto called The Great Replacement. In it, he described himself as an ethno-nationalist and an eco-fascist, and praised other killers like Anders Breivik. He also live-streamed the first shooting on Facebook, making it the first far-right terror attack to be broadcast in real time. His plan was to move on to a third mosque, but police rammed his car and took him into custody. He later pleaded guilty and received life in prison without parole, the harshest sentence in New Zealand's history. Just a month later, in April 2019, another attack linked to 8chan took place, this time in Poway, California, at the Chabad of Poway Synagogue. The gunman was a 19-year-old student named John Ernest. Armed with an AR-15-style rifle, he entered the synagogue on the last day of Passover with about 100 people inside. He shot and killed 60-year-old Laurie Gilbert Kay, who witnesses say tried to shield the rabbi. 3 others were injured, including Rabbi Yisroel Goldstein and an 8-year-old child. Ernest fled the scene but later called 911 on himself and was arrested not far from the synagogue. Like Christchurch, his actions were tied directly to 8chan. Minutes before the shooting, he posted a long manifesto to the site, filled with anti-Semitic conspiracy theories and praise for Brenton Tarrant, the Christchurch attacker. He even tried to live stream the shooting, but the attempt failed. His post was deleted within minutes, but the connection was already clear. It also wasn't the first time he had acted. Just weeks earlier, Ernest had tried to set fire to a mosque in Escondido, leaving behind graffiti referencing Christchurch. In both cases, he credited 8chan as a place where he had been radicalized. In 2021, Ernest was sentenced to life in prison without parole in both state and federal court. Then, in August 2019, came another attack, this time inside a Walmart in El Paso, Texas. The gunman was 21-year-old Patrick Crusius. Armed with a rifle, he opened fire on shoppers, killing 23 people and injuring 22 more. The FBI later described it as both a hate crime and an act of domestic terrorism, now considered the deadliest attack on Latinos in modern American history. Just minutes before the shooting, Crusius had also posted a manifesto to 8chan. Titled The Inconvenient Truth, it echoed the same themes as Christchurch, citing Brenton Tarrant as an inspiration. The text was filled with anti-immigrant rhetoric, talk of a so-called Hispanic invasion, and references to the white nationalist Great Replacement theory. Moderators quickly removed the post, but copies spread across the site within minutes. Crusius surrendered to police shortly after the attack. In 2023, he pleaded guilty to 90 federal murder and hate crime charges, receiving 90 consecutive life sentences. Then, in 2025, he was sentenced again at the state level to life in prison without parole. Today, 8kun is still active and still draws a large audience, but because Google blacklisted it, you can't find it through normal search. To reach it, users rely on alternative domains or Tor browsers. Despite the name change, it hasn't escaped its history. It's the same board that became tied to harassment, conspiracy, and real-world violence. Enchan first came online as an alternative to 4chan and 8chan. From the start, it set itself apart with the tagline, "This is the end," a kind of blunt message about what kind of place it wanted to be. Unlike 4chan, Enchan isn't just one unified board. Anyone can create and moderate their own space, which means the site is really a patchwork of different communities. Anonymity is built into the platform. It supports Tor, Locanet, and I2P, so users can connect through anonymizers instead of the clear web. The site also doesn't track users with cookies either, apart from saving layout preferences or capture timeouts. In short, Enchan was built to be harder to censor, more anonymous, and more decentralized than the other chans, having ties to some disturbing incidents. The site has its own poll board, along with spaces dedicated to QAnon and other conspiracy talk. These boards quickly filled with the same kind of content you'd expect: racism, anti-Semitism, and open praise for mass shooters. Enchan's whole theme of collapse and the end only made it more attractive to people with those views. Moderation was basically non-existent. Boards were run by whoever created them, and a lot of posts went unchecked. Users even pointed out that weren't banned, and after 8chan went offline, some of its community drifted straight into Enchan, carrying the same culture with them. That all came to a head in August 2019. 21-year-old Philip Munchhaus killed his adopted sister at their home in Bærum, Norway. Then he drove to the Al-Noor Islamic Center, armed with stolen guns, and opened fire after shooting through the doors. Nobody inside was killed, and worshippers managed to wrestle him to the ground before handing him to police. Just before the attack, Manshaus had posted on Enchan under his real name. He told others to bump the race war thread IRL and attached memes glorifying the Christchurch mosque shooter Brenton Tarrant, calling him Saint Tarrant. He even linked to photos of himself and to a Facebook live stream he planned to broadcast, though the stream failed. The post was deleted, but by then, the damage was done. N-chan had been used the same way as 8chan, as a place to announce a terror attack and spread the shooter's message. Outside of that, the site has been plagued with problems. Many boards are completely dead, technical issues drive users away, and arguments over whether to crack down on hate speech or keep absolute free speech have kept the community fractured. It's also been hit with floods of illegal content, CSAM, and spam. Even the site's own FAQ admits most material posted there comes through anonymous VPNs, which they still allow in the name of privacy. N-chan's smaller size never stopped it from becoming a platform where extremist posts could slip through. And the connection to a real-world mass shooting is what defines its reputation today. Hispachan was launched in November 2012 as a Spanish-language alternative to 4chan. At the time, there were already smaller boards in different countries, places like Sector-chan in Mexico, 6chan in Chile, and Puerto-chan in Puerto Rico, but each was tied to its own region. Hispachan set out to be something different, a global board where Spanish speakers from across Latin America, Spain, and beyond could all gather in one place. The site was created by an administrator who went by the name Zeta, though their real identity and nationality have never been confirmed. Its logo was a single character, Ñ, the most uniquely Spanish letter in the alphabet. That simple branding and broad scope helped the board grow quickly. Over the years, it became the largest Spanish-language image board in the world, reaching more than 17 million posts by 2019. In 2013, Hispachan became linked to a disturbing case in Spain. A neo-group, calling themselves Proyecto Pilla Pilla, used the board to coordinate real-world attacks. Their supposed mission was to lure and expose abusers, but what they actually carried out were violent homophobic assaults. The group posed online as 16-year-olds, which is the legal age of consent in Spain, arranging meetings with men in Barcelona. When their targets arrived, instead of finding who they thought they'd been speaking to, they were surrounded by a gang with a camera rolling. Victims were humiliated, threatened, and filmed in the street while being forced to hand over personal details. One man was taunted for more than 15 minutes before finally giving up his phone number as the group laughed and ridiculed him on camera. The videos were uploaded online, spread around, and used to further the group's image. They claimed to be protecting children, but their methods, and the ideology behind them, looked far closer to homophobic violence than anything resembling justice. Police in Catalonia eventually opened an investigation, and Spain's judicial authorities ordered Hispachan to take down the related threads. Then, in December 2015, Raúl Robles, better known online as Megabyte, was gunned down in a cafe in Guadalajara while eating breakfast with his father. He was hit 5 times by a masked gunman and died at the scene. Hours earlier, anonymous users on Hispachan had already posted threats naming him, the city, and even the cafe he often visited. This wasn't the first time either. Weeks before, someone had posted, "I know he's coming to my city and I'll kill him here," alongside a photo of Robles. The night before the attack, another post read, "I saw him eating breakfast in a cafe yesterday. He goes there very often. I'll wait and see if he comes tomorrow." Then, just hours later, the news would break out. Raúl Robles had been killed. Robles wasn't just any target. He was one of Mexico's best-known hackers, the CEO of Hacking Mexico, and had trained agents from the Attorney General's office and National Security Services. But he was also infamous in the hacker community. He bragged online about wealth, uploaded videos of sports cars and cash, and mocked and humiliated other hackers publicly. When he was killed, commenters mocked his death, calling him a fraud who got what he deserved. Some claimed he sexually harassed them. Others said he had made so many enemies that it was only a matter of time. To this day, authorities have never been able to solve the case. In January 2017, a user on Hispachan started a thread claiming he was going to carry out a massacre in Mexico, describing how there would be a lot of blood, that it would be shown on TV, and that he would end it by taking his own life. The next day, that warning played out. At 8:51 in the morning, 16-year-old Federico Guevara walked into his classroom at Colegio Americano del Noreste in Monterrey. He pulled out a .22 caliber handgun and shot one of his classmates at point-blank range. He then turned the gun on his teacher, 24-year-old Cecilia Solis, and several other students. Two 14-year-olds, Ana Cecilia Ramos and Luis Fernando Martinez, were critically injured with head wounds. Another student, 14-year-old Mariel Chavez, was shot in the arm but survived. Guevara then aimed the gun at himself. His first attempt missed, grazing his temple. He reloaded, pulled the trigger again, and this time, the bullet struck under his chin. He was rushed to the hospital, but was declared brain dead and died shortly after. After 2 months in intensive care, teacher Cecilia Solis died of her injuries. The entire attack was caught on the classroom's security camera. A copy of the footage was leaked and quickly spread across Twitter and Facebook. The newspaper, Reformer, published the video, and within hours, it was everywhere online. The shooting stunned the country, but the fact that it had been announced in advance on Hispachan is what tied the site directly to the tragedy. Hispachan has also had its share of other incidents that didn't reach the same level of notoriety, but still added to the site's reputation. In 2014, hackers from the board leaked access keys to the official website of Isabel Allende, then Chile's Senate president, and defaced it with memes and shock content. The following year, a Chilean TV program singled out Hispachan directly, calling it a place where predators shared resources. Around that same time, users of the site were implicated in organized harassment campaigns targeting feminist and LGBTQ+ activists across Latin America. And in 2016, the site was once again tied to vandalism when its Chile board hacked into the Salvador Allende Foundation's website, replacing it with explicit images of the country's former leader. Hispachan's name is tied to some serious controversies, from coordinated violence to threats and even killer cases, but on a few occasions, the site was used for something closer to vigilantism. In 2014, users helped expose a network of alleged predators through a setup called Star Teen Hostesses. A fake hostess agency was created on Facebook, claiming to offer girls between 9 and 23. Men contacted the page, asking about prices and services, and some even transferred deposits through PayPal. Screenshots of these conversations were posted back to Hispachan, showing names, faces, phone numbers, and bank slips. At least 19 men were exposed, with their information passed on to the authorities. In some cases, the setup went further. Men were told to show up at hotels in Mexico City, only to find nothing there. Others who backed out were threatened with exposure unless they paid. While the line between exposure and extortion was blurry, the operation still pulled dozens of people out into the light, with their information being handed over to the authorities. For once, Hispachan wasn't being used to spread abuse, but to try to shut it down. Then, in 2019, Hispachan played a role in bringing down Nido.org, a forum that had become notorious in Chile and across Latin America for hosting CSAM and revenge. The site had been running for about 2 years and had more than 10,000 subscribers. Victims described how their personal data and intimate photos were posted without consent, and in some cases, the discussions even alluded to possible kidnappings. Hispachan users organized a boycott. They created threads to expose the site, spread complaints, and reported it to other platforms. That pressure helped push authorities to investigate. By early 2019, Nido was taken offline. Its administrator was identified as Lamuel Lucas Luis Donoso Moscheni, and shortly afterward, Donoso took his own life by throwing himself onto the tracks of a Santiago subway station. After his death, Hispachan's administrators released a statement stressing that their site was different. They said that whenever victims reported personal photos, moderators removed them within 24 hours, and if a complaint was filed with police, they would provide IP addresses and user data to investigators. In their words, Hispa-chan is legal, and always will be, out of conviction. .12chan was launched in 2006 by a user known as K0W, right after the B-Day incident on 4chan. Many of the users who had been banned went looking for somewhere else to go, and 12chan quickly became their new home. The site stayed online until January 2010, when it finally went offline after just over 3 years of activity. From the beginning, 12chan carried a reputation that made it one of the most toxic corners of the Chan world. Unlike 4chan, where moderators at least made some effort to intervene, 12chan became known as the place where banned content elsewhere could continue without much interference. That included boards openly dedicated to jailbait and other illicit material, which quickly turned the site into one of the most infamous names in the network. By 2008, the site was already unstable, going offline and resurfacing under different domains and IPs. But the bigger cracks came from law enforcement. In the United States, investigators traced users back to large stashes of CSAM. One of them, Daniel M. Daigle from Louisiana, was a convicted offender who used 12chan and other sites to trade hundreds of images and videos. In 2011, he was sentenced to 15 years in prison and placed on lifetime supervision and ordered to register as a sex offender. In Australia, federal police went further, arresting a 16-year-old moderator of 12chan in early 2010. At his home, they found thousands of files of CSAM, and he was charged with possession and distribution. By January 2010, the original 12chan domain was gone for good. Some rumors claimed it briefly redirected to Reddit's infamous jailbait subreddit, which at the time was still active, but the original site never came back. Between US prosecutions, international raids, and mounting pressure from service providers, 12chan collapsed completely, its name left as a marker for one of the darkest Chan communities ever to exist. Anon.ib, short for Anonymous Imageboard, was launched in 2006. Like other Chans, it let users create and run their own boards. But from the beginning, it was rough around the edges. The site became infamous for constant ads, malware, and a complete lack of active development. Even its own community hated the way it was run, and many users left for alternatives like IB4F, YourSpiff, or spun up their own smaller sites. The FBI began looking into Anon.ib as early as April 2008, and its hosting provider, Rackspace, was already pushing to cut ties with it. Anon.ib built its reputation as a home for stolen images and revenge. It was tied to the 2014 celebrity leak known as the Fappening, and its boards were known for hosting CSAM and even nudes of active US service members. At its peak, the site ranked among the top 10,000 most visited in the world. The end came in 2018, when Dutch police launched an investigation after a woman discovered her private cloud storage had been hacked and her photos posted on the site. The suspect, a 31-year-old man from Culemborg, was arrested, and forensic analysis of his devices uncovered huge amounts of stolen material. That led authorities to 2 more men in Groningen and Heerlen, who between them had collected and shared intimate images from hundreds of women. Servers inside the Netherlands holding the site's data were seized, and 3 Dutch nationals were ultimately arrested for running it. Police announced that any victims identified in the recovered archives would be contacted directly. Anon.ib's closure didn't erase its footprint. Advocacy groups like Badass had already been fighting it for years, sometimes resorting to flooding its boards with images of Shrek to drown out the abuse. After the servers were seized, threads on 4chan and Reddit showed users begging for alternatives, and within 2 years, a clone appeared, copying the look of the original and attracting thousands of posters. But while the new site tried to capture the same following, it also showed how quickly others had stepped in to fill the gap, with many of them even crueler than Anon.ib, hiding images behind paywalls when victims begged for removal. Anon.ib is gone, but its name still carries weight across Chan culture. Shutting down the domain only scattered the demand, leaving its legacy alive in copies, archives, and successors that refuse to disappear. At the very bottom of the iceberg are the image boards that don't exist on the open internet anymore. Instead, they're hidden on the dark web, accessible only through onion services. These sites are built to be harder to take down, harder to monitor, and deliberately removed from the reach of mainstream hosting companies. 9chan is one of the clearest examples. It first appeared in 2019, copying the same layout as other poll boards, but quickly lost its hosting. From that point forward, it operated entirely on the dark web. What showed up there was content even more extreme than what had been tolerated on sites like 8chan. Users posted propaganda calling for violence, anti-Semitic material, and threads encouraging others to carry out attacks, sometimes even sharing lists of potential targets. The audience was small, but what was being said there was far more direct. But it isn't the only one. Other boards like Tor-chan and hidden mirrors of sites such as End-chan serve the same purpose. Darknet monitoring firms have reported that there are more than 24 of these chans active on Tor right now, in multiple languages, many of them simple clones of older sites. Some act only as backups, ensuring content isn't lost if a ClearNet board is taken offline. Others exist specifically so that people can post material that would never survive anywhere else. The reason for this push into the darknet is the content itself. These boards have become repositories for extremist manifestos, terrorist propaganda, and accelerationist memes calling for mass violence. They also host content that is illegal in most countries, including distribution of CSAM, which makes them impossible to host anywhere else. By moving to the dark web, these boards create safe havens where posts won't be removed, archives won't be wiped, and communities can continue to exist even after their surface versions are shut down. So the bottom of the iceberg isn't just a handful of hidden image boards. It represents the end point of the culture, a place where anonymity is absolute, moderation is non-existent, and the most disturbing content remains, long after the rest of the internet thinks it's gone.